how we clean them up, how we extract these units, how we clean them up, and how we take care of them, and how we store them. Uh, pretty pretty important to your success for next year. So that's why we're going to be talking about all this. So without further ado, topics for the day we're going to cover. So we're going to go to the actual web page. The actual web pages you're going to go to and see the instructions you're going to see. Nick is going to actually take over at one point in time, and then he's going to pull out his phone and show you on the mobile app exactly where we're going. We're going to show you how to we're going to show you the navigate to the sensor tool. Nick is going to recommend using Google navigation. Most of you poor folks out there are deciding that you're still going to stick with Apple. Don't use the Apple Maps. Apparently, he's saying you need to go and make sure that it's defaulting to the Google navigation. And if you want it to Google navigation at all times, go Android. Anyway, let's see here. And deactivating the we're going to do a little bit of deactivating the sensor. I'm going to have Nick explain hibernation mode versus active mode. The best practices for your sensor extraction, cable management, adding water, everything else. So this is we're going to go over this. And the biggest thing we're going to go over today is the V4 and how we're going to make sure that you take care of this unit, especially as you pull it out of the field, and how you get it put up for the year, everything else, because it's going to be very, very, it's going to be very good. All right. So
go ahead and start sharing your screen, Preston.
I thought I was.
Nope.
Apologies.
We see it clearly.
All right. Excellent. So, like I said, topic's going to be covered today, the highlights of what we're going to be going over. I'm going to go ahead and take us directly to the extractions. Still seeing that clearly, Ben. I put it to where it went with edge. Excellent. All right. So, guys, navigating to the sensor. Use the flags to mark the row placed and install. The end row flags that you placed. Hopefully, your farmers have kept those sacred throughout the year. Now, in southern farms, this is not a thing. I swear to you, for years I've been using flags. For years I've been using flags to mark spots out there for land leveling use and land forming projects that we have coming up. Doesn't matter how important you tell everybody on that farm it is, it seems like they aim for flags. So anyway, because of that, because you might not have your end row flag still available to you to be able to know exactly what row to start traveling up, we have the ability to navigate to that sensor. So here's a small video that goes over that.
I can share this live, Preston. You want me to?
Can you?
Yep.
Yeah, if you will. Well, there it went.
Okay. Let me just go ahead and do it anyway.
I got you.
Yep. All right, folks, live demo territory. The feature that Preston was talking about was something that we've done some improvements to in the last year or so. The easiest way to get to both the navigation feature, and I will also skip ahead since I've already got my screen up, to the deactivate, which is a critical step during extraction. So from the sensors list, so you can see I went from my overview to my sensors tab. As I'm loading my sensors here, and it's probably taking longer because I'm trying to share my screen at the same time. each sensor listed on your list will have 3 buttons: a nav, a map, and then essentially your actions. Well, we'll try this again.
You know, they say live streaming is fun, Nick.
Yeah, usually it works in my favor. I like to challenge it. There we go. All right, so the 3 buttons I was talking about across the bottom of your sensor list. So remember that on both web and mobile, you have a list view, which is what we're looking at now. You have a map view, which is that button up in the top right corner. So you could go to a map. We're seeing everything. You could go back to your list view. You can also use the filter buttons or for filter features in order to find the grower you need, or maybe with a specific sensor type. You can also use the global search. So up here in the search bar, if you had a specific field name, you could search for that sensor. But using this navigation feature, it's this middle button here on each sensor card, and you have the option to open up that pin in Apple and Google Maps. I do recommend Google Maps because it seems like there's like intermittent like discrepancies on where that pin is dropping in Apple for some reason. Like you'd think the Apple would just interpret a lat long pretty simply, but it doesn't always seem to be the case. So you don't want to end up off track. When you do click that button, let me find one here. It'll open up that app. It drops the pin. It tells you how to get there. Obviously, if you're within the field's boundaries or close to the field, you can even use it to walk directly to the sensor. Again, as Preston mentioned, really this should be used as a backup with talking about in-field navigation. It should be used as a backup in tall crops with compared to a flag. Flags should always be your primary navigation source.
There's going to be frustration with any autonomous signal like we're talking about here. Repeatability of plus or minus 8 feet. Okay, so that could be as much as 16. Well, you know, as much as 16 one way or the other. Now, most times in today's world, I see it be plus or minus 8 feet. But either way, how many rows is that, folks? You could be sitting there kind of hunting and pecking around for a little while before you find it. I'm just saying, please make sure you keep the flags sacred.
And to clarify, so this coordinate is the coordinate that you submitted at the time of install. It is not the coordinate that is being reported by the device. Those are 2 different things. Obviously, they should be the same thing, but what coordinate you are navigating to is based on what you submitted at the time of install.
Yeah, and if that is off a little bit, customer support can find what the sensor is transmitting as its location and text that to you in order to help you find it if you're out in the field and can't locate it.
Yep. And sometimes that does, move, that helps, but I wouldn't also rely on that as a primary means of finding it.
Nick, quick deal here. The chat apparently is disabled for attendees.
That's
at this point in time.
Should all come through the Q&A. So there's a Q&A feature in Zoom webinar, and that's where you can post a question and we can post an answer.
Ah, okay, gotcha.
Yep.
There you go, Kendall.
So moving on to feature number 2, critical. This is done at the time of extraction. When you are in the field, you do this. If you don't do it, your graph is going to look funny. Your sensor is going to keep reporting measurements, you need to deactivate the sensor in the field. And takes 2 seconds to do. You click that actions button. That's that 3-dot menu up in the top right corner of each sensor card. And you click on deactivate. One other thing, I actually did some extractions earlier this week. I did find the map feature actually quite helpful compared to years prior because of the improvements we've done. You know, you can zoom in far enough to see all of your sensor locations in relation to your current location, the different field boundaries, etc. If you've got this list filtered to, only active sensors, or I'm sorry, yeah, you're only going to see the active sensors on your map. So if there's a green pin, you still need to deactivate it or go extract it. All right, turning it back over to you.
All right, thanks, Nick. So
Share
I
your
want to talk.
screen.
Yeah. I want to talk about the extractions, the legacy extractions. Yeah, the legacy extractions are still going the same way that I think they've gone over the last couple of years as far as that goes. So how to extract the sensor, all this is right here on the web. All this is right here on the website. Now, the link that I've got up is from our actual partner help site. Is that correct, Nick? Versus what, versus what they'll see if you just went to cropx.com, you can find all this same almost all this same information there too. There's a few things that we have as far as pricing and things of that nature that the dealer, that only the dealers would see. Correct?
Just our standard knowledge base, help.cropx.com. Everything's available there.
Gotcha. Okay. Anyway, so if you're extracting a legacy sensor, you're using the star adapter to rotate the sensor counterclockwise out of the soil. Okay. Rotate it with your hands, apply upward force if the sensor is rotating but not coming out of the soil. Using a spade shovel, a tile spade. I didn't realize it was there a specific kind of spade shovel. Anyway, sorry. A tile spade can be used to dig and loosen the soil around it if you're having trouble getting that thing out. If you're having a lot of difficulty, drill some holes around it. Pour plenty of water down through the area. The drilling of the holes is what's actually going to make sure that you can get as much infiltration of that water as possible down there, so you can make it as easy as possible and get it out. Nobody wants to be sitting here messing around with one sensor for quite some time. There are some that are more difficult than others, but it brings me to something that I want to talk about from previous webinar that we had at that point in time. So I don't think, here, I'm going to get off my screen share and go to video. Nick, if I'm talking, it's going to put my screen out just a little bit bigger, correct? I don't know. Anyway, I hope everybody can see that. All right. Remember, we're talking about coming down to a smaller end down here as we're putting it in. Whenever Nick and BT were doing the original installation webinar this year, what they talked about is what install tool you actually use to put these things in. I bring this up because I'm hearing more and more from my customers that, wow, the V4s are very easy to uninstall. Now, some of that is just the design, and thank God for the extra effort that they put into this. Some of it also is I believe they took their install bit, and I think they drilled down too far. All right, okay, with it. We talked about short stop. We talked about either short stopping and letting the last few inches just be pushed into the ground, which Nick Stahl did not approve of, or we talked about using a better tool for the installation to make sure that you didn't have any lack of contact down here on this on this sensor. You didn't want this thing just kind of free sitting. And based on what I'm seeing, these things are coming out very easy. I think I don't know, Nick, I'd like you to kick in here if you have any thoughts on this, but it worried me a little bit that maybe maybe we drilled out the holes a little bit too wide in there, and that might be why that's so easy. Or do you believe that it's just the perfect manufacturing of these V4s?
I think the whole quality is probably a lot more dependent on who drilled it rather than what they were
Which
drilling
tool?
with. So,
Okay.
I think you can get a fine hole with either auger, but
Yeah.
so that's kind
Okay.
of tough to say. I think we've just got to really improve design.
I mean, really, it is. But I've been hearing nothing but compliments on this. The fact that we're now able to get these things out that much easier. I just like that. I mean, obviously, go ahead and peel this thing off. We're going to talk about it here in a minute. But that design to just be able to put that metal bar through and go, you can pull back on this thing. Once you take the antenna off, you can actually pull and twist as you go, which is just much more, which is much easier. And I think that has as much to do with it as anything else. But I just want to make sure if for some reason you guys are seeing some sensor data readings at the bottom of this thing and you didn't agree with them for the year, please let us know so we can start working on that. Not to create any extra work for you, Nick, but I don't have a concern there, but I'm curious as much as anything else. So anyway,
Yeah.
Are there any questions on extractions?
Yeah, I would just second that water is a tool if needed. Add water if needed. And the ability to apply upward pressure with the new mushroom design on the V4 is a game changer for extractions as well as the tapered design. So if anybody isn't familiar with the current design of the V4, it's tapered. That mushroom allows you to put that bar through and pull, whereas the previous designs were not tapered. And you had to apply down pressure in order to keep contact with that star design of the previous version.
Okay, so our next, let's see here. Share this again. All right, so we've talked about navigating, we've talked about deactivating, best practices for the sensor extraction. Cable management, obviously, for the V4 is going to be easier than the V2 because on the V4, we just simply unscrew it and put it to the side when we go to work. So that's pretty simple. Obviously, we remember the legacy sensor not being exactly that simple. So you need to make sure you get that thing twisted twisted around to where you can actually put your star bit inside that thing and start to extract it and not mess up your cabling in the process. So Nick, you want to speak to that real quick as far as the cable management on the legacies?
Yeah, V4 is way easier. It's a simple threaded connection. Just a pro tip on there that, I would coil it, real kind of how it came brand new to you, and use zip ties or like Velcro straps to store it until you're ready to put it back in the ground. Don't just let like 9 feet of cable just hang out the back of your truck and Just manage your cables.
I think anybody that's ever been anywhere near precision ag, zip ties and side cutters or dikes, as some people call them, all right, are your best friends in the world for cable management. Obviously, there's also those Velcro cable ties, but for the eco-friendly people that are worried about that, that's great. But sometimes pulling those things out could be a pain, or messing with wrapping them around. It is what it is. Obviously, I think the landfills would appreciate it if you use the Velcro things. They'd be a more permanent option year in, year out. But if not, zip ties being your best friend in that regard, as far as that goes. And then not applying to. I know this is common sense. I'm going to say it anyway because common sense isn't common, but let's please, whenever you are zip tying things up, make sure you're not bending it in an awkward, in an awkward way whatsoever towards the connectors, or too tight whenever you're doing so. Okay. So moving on, we're going to talk about the off-season best practices that we've got. Okay. We're going to talk about the V4 caps. I wish this was a little more interactive, Nick. I know you got the questions and answers, but I did like the chat to be able to kind of go back and forth with some folks. But I'm certain we got black caps out to everybody that ordered V4s. And so everybody saw the Catwoman version of these particular caps. How many of you actually got them on? Can they just send the chat to you via that questions portion,
Yeah,
Nick, and it comes through?
Yeah, and some of them are raising their hand. So
Yeah.
Okay, good deal.
We have a mix of answers here. Some saying no, some saying yes.
Okay, gotcha. All right. So the new model, which is, I think Tomer named the black model the Catwoman. Is that correct? All right. I'm going to dub this thing Orange Hello Kitty. Okay. Everybody else is probably going to have their own names for it. All right. And yes, every salesman, I'd like you to know, every territory manager put these things on their heads and made sure they fit. All right. Obviously didn't fit on mine, but it snugly sat down there for a second. So everybody's had them on there. I'm sure as soon as they get to your place, you're going to have one of your employees that's going to do the exact same thing that our childish selves did, which is just to slap it on like a hat. But anyway, very simple to apply this thing to the unit itself. Okay. It's not a whole lot of lineup issue whatsoever. You take it, put it on, bam, slides right through to where that coax cable plugs in. There's currently a spot, and I'll go to the next slide. There's actually currently a spot on there, guys, where you see that we have an actual slot to, it looks like, put the QR code for the sensor on there. I guess that's future proofing for something that we're going to provide with the next layer of sensors. Nick, is that correct? We're going to give a barcode that can go, we're going to give the QR code that can actually go there on the outside.
No.
Okay. I was wondering, I'm sorry. I'm just, as people see them, I don't want them to have the questions. So that's why I'm bringing it up now.
Yeah. Yeah, let me rewind a little to familiarize everyone with the process. We identified that some of the caps had a risk of letting some moisture in. It was a low risk. We moved quickly at the beginning of the season. Obviously, we wanted to be proactive. And so when we moved quickly, we got the black versions out. They're a harder plastic. That was what we could essentially get the quickest and the quickest deployed. And then with more time, we were able to develop a more permanent solution with a silicone version, which is more flexible, that fits tighter. And the reason that QR symbol is on there, it's directing you to where the QR code is so that you can simply just flap the the flexible silicone up, scan it, and just flap it back down. So you don't even have to remove it. And now that we have a flexible version, you can just flip it up and flip it down. It's just showing you where the QR code is located on the sensor. During install, you obviously have to scan the QR code, so it's just directing you to that location. So moving into 2024, again, I mean, we'll be honest, like this ended up being less of a big deal than we even originally thought. So the risk is low. If for some reason you do find water in the cap, really the only risk is that it could drain your battery. So if you simply swapped or charged and dried it out, it should work just fine right away. And so that was really our only risk. So if you do find that for some reason, just keep that in mind. It's not a huge problem. There's really two separate compartments within the sensor, and all of the electronics are in a separate area from the cap. The cap is just to access the battery. And again, for those that haven't really messed with taking the cap on and off, it's like a quarter turn, and it tightens as you screw it down.
So I was actually going to go through this, Nick. I was going to spend a little bit more time on this one just from the taking them out
Visual.
and put them up standpoint. So yeah, like they talked about, I mean, we said it in the deal. It's not that difficult. All right. Oh, wow. You guys are including silica packets now. In these original installs. Obviously I haven't pulled this out yet. So anyways, you pull that cap off, guys, sorry, let me get that a little better. So as you pull this cap off, folks, I just want to make sure you see this seal that we've got here. All right. We do not want you putting them up with any dirt inside this seal whatsoever. Okay. So my best practice at this point that I've told my dealers, or at least the ones I'm talking to that have been in the middle of extractions, or a few of them, is that we're going to get the air gun out on this particular project. No different than if you're building a hydraulic hose, guys. Let's just blow this thing off as soon as we get it out, and make sure that we keep this thing up. Let's not remove the cap while we're out in the field. Let's wait until we get back to the office in order to start doing this. But you can start lining these things up in an assembly line, start blowing them out, make sure that you don't have any dirt in there, that there's no problems with the way it's going to seal down. I know Maloney, if Maloney's in here, that was one of the first things he said was how much we were going to end up with water in these things. So just the fact that we've got this conversation, but he thought his argument settled around the fact that we were going to get it through the actual coax portion. And looks like, Nick, that if we got it through, it was through this area. We're focusing on what's going on as far as this cap goes, correct? That's the main focus. Okay.
That's right.
Excellent. So like I said, keep this thing clean. If you get in here and you see any moisture whatsoever, all right, let's just make sure we get the battery out. Obviously, we're going to keep the battery stored in a different place than we are in the sensor. Is that correct? Is that what we're telling people? We're going to tell them to keep it up, or we're going to tell them to put the battery back in it and keep it there all year?
I think it's better to just make sure that it's charged and then store the battery back into the unit. I don't think it's super critical either way. The advantage to having that battery in there is that by the time you're ready to pull that out in spring, it should be transmitting. And again, that would mean it would have to have an antenna, but so that's why I don't feel strongly either way. Just so everybody understands the behavior of the sensor. When it's in the field, it's in an active mode. It's measuring and transmitting, measuring and transmitting. When it's uninstalled and you hit that deactivate button, it switches its mode and it goes into what we basically call hibernation state. It still transmits all the time. Obviously, it won't do that if you don't have a battery or an antenna plugged into it. It will not transmit. So,
Well, I've been going back and forth with people on this as to how we're going to do this. I mean, the general practice with a legacy sensor was we were telling people to, or at least I have been, based on some of the previous text, based on some of the previous text and webinars that I'd seen, that leave the battery uncharged, or don't mess with how much charge it's got on it until right before you're about to start next season. And by that, I mean 2 or 3 weeks before installation season, line everything up, get everything charged. So with that practice in mind, if that's something you're still going to be doing, if you've got some place you want to put you want to put these up in a storage and you feel better about, I don't understand how you wouldn't feel just as good about having them inside this, inside this little cocoon with the cap on, and making sure that it stays there. Because the last thing I'd want you to do is lose your batteries, especially for some of you guys that have plenty of these things.
yeah, that you're right on our previous recommendation. I think that was mainly just to make your workflow efficient. I think what I've learned from that, though, is that batteries are sensitive to, not sensitive, but like it's better to have a battery at 80% capacity in a relatively moderate temperature rather than in severe temperatures. Whether that's cold, would obviously be the main risk in the winter. So, keeping a lithium ion battery at 20% at freezing temperatures outside in a shed somewhere, not ideal. For longevity's sake, I mean, these batteries are expensive. You might as well keep them in a climate controlled area. So whether that means that you can do that with them in the sensor, or maybe it just means that you can do them outside of the sensor. That's up to where you have them stored at.
Okay. Well, thanks for the clarification on that, Nick. So we're going to get back into the cleaning portion of this too. All right. I know I'm kind of jumping around a little bit, but since we took the battery out, I wanted to talk about it. But when you get done, we're talking about, we've already taken our air gun and we've blown this portion off and make sure it's clean. Okay. Maybe even that's a follow-up step to what I would say would be the main step is if you find any moisture in this unit whatsoever, let's make sure to get it dry. Let's make sure to get it dried out. All right. Cleaned up inside, blow it out with the air, but always a good practice. Let's see here. I don't think I can actually show the intricacies in here as far as this goes. I can try to get down as close as possible. Maybe you can see it, and I don't think so. But there, the two battery, the battery connects up, where the rubber meets the road with this thing. We want to make sure that you actually get those connection points. Just take a Q-tip and some rubbing alcohol. That's what I've always done with my electronics, Nick. Are we talking about anything different here?
Sounds
for the practice? So yeah, a Q-tip and some rubbing alcohol, clean off these contact points, make sure everything is dry inside, clean off the contact points on your battery itself. Now you've got it good and dry, slip that thing back in. And if you, maybe you could hear that coming over and maybe you couldn't, I don't know. But whenever you slide your battery back in, obviously it's got that neat little beep, beep, beep sound it makes that, lets you know that you're home. I just made Nick smile a little bit when I tried to, when I tried to do that. Anyway, put your cap back on and put it up. Now I looked for some prime examples for you guys over the last 24 hours to try to find somebody that had a good storage practice as far as how they put these things up. Now I have seen some people's, I didn't take pictures of them, all right, where they had racks that they just slide right into, and they leave them hanging one by one, you know, in like rows of 10 or rows of 10 or rows of 15 of them in their shops. And that works out very, very well. Whatever you guys end up coming up with. I would like to practice. I would like to say that if you've ever been on the bottom of a pig pile, all right, of a large pig pile, think about that whenever you're actually deciding that you're just going to throw these things into a bin and what the bottom one feels like. Okay. Is all I got to tell you. It's no different. You don't want yourself treated that way. And I guarantee you don't want your, you know, I mean, this is your moneymaker right here, guys, especially if you're leasing them like most of you are. You want to make sure these things, you know, take the lick and keep on ticking. I'm not saying that's going to break them, but I mean, over time. So just don't do, you know, I mean, there's no reason to do it that way. I would try to find some way to be able to put them up and make sure that they've got some, make sure that they've got some spacing. Nick, have you got some thoughts on that?
Nope.
Okay, gotcha. BT, any thoughts?
No, putting them in rows, hanging on a shelf is a great way to do it.
Kind of what I'm thinking. I wish I'd have taken a picture of this guy's setup, and I tried to call everybody up that I could, try to get them to take a picture of what they had as far as their racks go. I've been over to John Beasley's place. As far as the, you know, as far as what I've seen, the way he put up his telemetry boxes this year, his gateways, very, very, you know, he had a pretty nifty on the wall storage space for all of them. I can only imagine what Maloney and those guys have as far as how they put all their gear up every year. It's probably got to be pretty snazzy. But anyway, that's it as far as the V4 goes. And that really covers just about all of it. Now I'm going to get down here into the charging portion. Just a second, share my screen again. All right, charging the legacy CropX sensor versus charging the V4. So obviously we've made a a big leap forward whenever it comes to this. But for you guys that still have the legacy sensors, okay, you're removing the 5 screws on the top of the sensor. You're going to remove the charging socket cover. You're going to connect the USB cable to the USB cable port. And then you're going to hook it up to, you know, you're going to hook it up to power, and you're going to charge that bad boy. So it'll be 12 to 24 hours to actually make sure that you have it fully charged, or until the light changes to green or flashes blue, depending upon the version. I guess I've never seen the flashing blue. Is that on an, nah, never mind, Nick. Okay. Or it's so that I haven't seen the green. Can't remember. Anyway. Before reattaching the charging socket cover, make sure the rubber gasket is in place. So just pop all that stuff back together in the V2, guys, and the legacy sensor, and then go back to work. The V4, obviously, we talked about this. Now, when we talk about best practices, especially with these V4s and the legacy sensors, I saw people have multiple units out there. Nick, if you have a link to any multi-charging ports or something of that nature that you could share here in a minute, that'd be great. If not, no big deal. Maybe we could even put that out via text. I thought about that last night. I couldn't find one that I actually liked on Amazon or one that I've used. I tried to get the Greenway guys to let me know exactly which one they use, but I've seen that they've got one charging station that's doing like 25 units at a time or something of that nature, and they've got them on the bench. And I watched that when it was sitting there with the legacy sensors leaned up against it. It's obviously much easier doing it now with these particular units. Once again, the actual plug for it is micro USB. That is the term for that, isn't it, Nick? That is still micro USB, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. So anyway, it's a micro USB charger. It's not USB-C like almost everything else in the world's going to. I get that. But from a charging standpoint, every kind of charging station in the world was using that for I don't know how many years. So that's pretty convenient. I mean, heck, you can, like me, I've probably got 15 or 20 of these things just stocked back somewhere in a drawer that I don't use anymore. But anyway, try to be as efficient with it as possible, but make sure that you're getting clean. Make sure that you've got a pretty clean power rating on anything that you're dealing with as far as doing the charging of the V4s. But that one's pretty simple.
Yep. Yeah. There's hundreds of options on Amazon. Just, I don't think it matters. You can just pick which one you want.
Yeah, I couldn't find one that I could absolutely recommend hands down over the others. So sorry about that, guys, but that's just the deal there. So there's charging batteries. We've done deactivating the sensor. We've done sensor extractions. Well,
Yeah, I'll just throw in that you know, we've been talking about the CropX sensor. All of the same thing applies to the CropX gateways as far as the navigation, the deactivate, the charging recommendations. Obviously, they're not going to, I mean, you could store them differently. I'm going to be planning on storing them in some tubs. They fit really nice in some of the construction tubs I've got. So, and I freed up a lot of storage because they're a lot smaller. So just second and third, the cap thing, just make sure and put those out with caps. The V4s need to be going out with caps. Like, yeah, it's low risk, but at the same time, like the silicone version that we're going to be getting you, so just be looking out for packages for that. If we didn't, you know, we'll be getting you orange caps for everything that you already have. Those need to be going out with the V4s next year because there's just not a reason not to. It's easy. It lowers risk, and our idea with making them orange was to improve visibility. We might tweak the colors a little bit between now and when we deliver any remaining stock we need to get you. But again, just make sure that it's going out with a cap.
Once again, I personally think this is going to help the kids want to actually join us and help us on this sort of thing. I mean, this thing is cute now, guys. I mean, honestly, you know, I'm a father of a daughter. All right, she had some Hello Kitty stuff. Hey, you know, this is all right here. I think just beyond the visibility, this is kind of nice. And you know me, I'm going to make a joke out of anything, but I like it. So anyway, make sure you put your caps on the units. Just going to be a best practices sort of way to handle things. Have we got any questions yet?
No new questions right now.
Okay. I mean, this one's an easy subject, but at the same time, something I want you guys to pay attention to as far as what goes on here. You know, if anything in the world, we want you to make sure, number one, is put the caps on the units. Better to have it, you know, better to need it and not have it, or excuse me, have it and not need it, than need it and not have it. Is all I got to say whenever it comes to that. That's just a best practices mantra as far as I'm concerned.
Yep. Just another nugget too. You can deactivate sensors on web. Here's where to do that. So I'm on the field. I clicked on field settings and then sensors. There's a deactivate button here.
Nick, I was going to ask you about that. Do you, you would recommend that they actually deactivate before they go out to the field?
No.
Okay.
Just,
all right.
You've got your phone right there with you. Just do it in the field. Like, I don't think you're going to need web because
that's why I'm asking. Yeah.
So
web's great if you forget to do it.
Yeah, it's another option. Well, that's
carry
a wrap,
it out
folks.
there, make it part of it. There it is.
Yep. Contact customer support if you need anything between now and extraction season. If you're also questioning, you know, when to be for sure done irrigating, contact customer support. Otherwise, have a good rest of the week, and we will be posting the recording.
One more thing, guys. One more thing before you go. Okay. Make sure you get a hold